It's time to make it. Just give it a try. 'Cause you can make it like the old fat guy.
Thanks for watching today's show of You Can Make It with David Farrell, the Old Fat Guy. Today I'm going to make something that's a real treat that everybody loves, and that's a kind of cinnamon roll. However, some people don't like raisins, and one day a friend asked me to make him a cinnamon roll without raisins, so this is the result. It's called caramel apple rolls. It's like a cinnamon roll, but with apples instead of raisins. I think you'll really like it. Also, it's a quick rise dough method, so it's quite easy. Let me show you how I make them. We start off with some dry ingredients, and I have 475 milliliters or 2 cups of all-purpose flour. Now, if you're measuring flour in a cup, it's hard. You got to make sure it doesn't get packed down. You got to very carefully spoon it in and level it off. So I prefer to use weights. So I'm using 250 grams of all-purpose flour. And I'm just going to put that in my mixer bowl. And then, in addition to that, you need some sugar because you're making a sweet dough for cinnamon rolls. And I've got here 80 milliliters or 1/3 cup of sugar. And I have some rapid rise yeast. You cannot use regular yeast. It's got to be the rapid rise variety. And I have 22 milliliters, or that's the equivalent of 2 envelopes of rapid rise yeast, or 4½ teaspoons if you're using bulk. And I have 1 teaspoon and 5 milliliters of salt. Even if you're on a low salt diet, you need to know you have to put salt in bread because it helps make the structure. So I'll add those to the dry ingredients. Now I'm just going to stir those around a bit to mix them up. There we go. And the next thing I'm going to do is introduce some liquid ingredients. And what I have here is 350 milliliters or 1½ cups of water and 90 milliliters or 6 tablespoons of butter. But this has to be warm but not hot. So I want to heat it up to between 120 and 130 degrees Fahrenheit. I'll be doing that in the microwave, which I'll do in a second. You'll note that the butter doesn't melt totally when I do this, but that's fine. It won't be any problem at all. Excuse me while I put this in the microwave. My water is heated up to 125 degrees Fahrenheit. Now, if you do not have one of these fancy instant read thermometers, you can just put your little finger in there. It should feel warm but not hot. And you'll notice the butter isn't melted, but like I said, don't worry about that. Now we want to add that to our dry ingredients in my mixer bowl. Now, I will tell you that if you do not have a stand mixer, you can do this by using a spoon and just mixing this together until it starts to form a ball, and then mix it hard by hand for 3 minutes and you'll get the same result. So I added the water and the butter to my flour, and I'm going to add 1 egg. An egg gives a sweet dough some richness. And then I'm just going to slowly start mixing it up to start getting the items to come together. And I'll slowly increase the speed. There we go. And now I'm going to let it mix for 2 minutes. The mixer's been going for 2 minutes, and I'm just going to shut her down now. And we're going to scrape it down. And remember, you could have done that by your hand. Like I said, you're just making a batter like you would a cake batter, so just use a wooden spoon and mix it all up well. But I'm lazy. I use my stand mixer. So, once you've gone for the 2 minutes, you want to scrape the bowl down and make sure you get any flour that's sticking on the bottom. So I've scraped the bowl down and got all the flour off of it. I'm going to be adding some more flour. I'm going to be adding 600 milliliters or 2½ cups of flour, which weighs 317 grams. And you just want to add it in and give it a quick stir there. Scrape any excess off the spatula. And I'm going to change to a dough hook, and I'm going to make a really soft dessert dough. So we'll just put the dough hook on. Now, if you do not have a stand mixer, Add that second lot of flour a little bit at a time and mix it by hand until it's too hard to mix. And then turn it onto a counter and add the rest of the flour a little bit at a time as you knead it by hand until you've got all the flour in, and then knead it for 7 more minutes. Now with the stand mixer, I can just add the flour and let it knead with the stand mixer for 8 minutes. So we'll just slowly turn it on and we'll let it go for 8 minutes, at which time our dough will be kneaded. See you then. We kneaded the dough for another 8 minutes with the stand mixer, or you put it out on a counter by hand. And you'll note this dough is really soft. So it's important that we give it a little bit of coating of flour so we can work with it. So I'm just going to sprinkle some flour on a counter here. There we go. And I'm going to rub some on my hands. And we're going to take the dough out of the mixer here. Just get my spatula, take it off of the dough hook. There we go. And we'll take it and turn it onto that generous amount of flour we put on the counter. And you'll see that it's just a little soft and sticky. Normally with the dough that'd be a problem, but not for this fast rise type recipe. Now that we've got it on the counter, we're just going to sprinkle a little bit of flour over the top of it. And we want to knead it just about 4 or 5 times. All you're trying to do is to get a coating of the flour on top, and you'll see that makes it not sticky anymore. So we're just going to take that and put it on a plate, and we're going to let it rise for about 10 minutes. We're going to put a towel over it and just let it sit, and that gets the dough a good consistency. So we're going to do something while it's resting, but I'm just going to set this aside and set up my cooktop, and I'll see you in a minute. What we have to do now is make the caramel topping for the cinnamon rolls. And what I have here is a pan, and in it I have 120 milliliters or a half cup of butter. I have 235 milliliters or 1 cup of brown sugar, and 60 milliliters or 1/4 cup of light corn syrup. And you just want to mix them together over heat and bring it to a boil. This is a caramel base, and it will give a wonderful, sweet, shiny coating to your cinnamon rolls. It's also real important you keep stirring it all the time. You do not want to scorch that sugar. You can see bubbles are starting to form. That's what we're looking for. There we go. It is now boiling. So we can turn our cooktop off. And what we want to do is split it between 2 8-inch square baking pans. Now, I've sprayed these with some baking spray. It just helps it come out easier at the end. And do not worry about being exact on the halves, but try and get it close. Just pour half in this one, half in this one. There we go. And we have the makings for our caramel topping. Now, I like walnuts on my cinnamon roll, so I'm going to take 125 milliliters or half a cup of chopped walnuts, and I'm going to divide that between the 2 pans. Make sure you get it right out to the edges. Now, we're still waiting for our bread to finish rising, and I need to set up my workspace to do some more work with the dough on the counter. So give me a moment and we'll set up to do that. Our dough has risen for 10 minutes under a towel, and we've made our caramel topping. So now's the time to form it into cinnamon rolls. So you just want to take the dough, and I've pre-floured a surface here very generously. And you want to turn your dough onto the floured surface. Get some flour on your hands. And what you're looking to do is to stretch this out into a rectangle about 12 by 15 inches. One of the reasons you let it rest for 10 minutes is it'll make it much easier to do this. So we'll just keep going until we get a pretty nice looking square. And we're not quite 12 inches across, so we need to stretch that way. And that's looking pretty close to 12. And I think we need a bit more in length, so we'll just stretch it this way. And square it up. So that's about 15, a little less than 12, so we'll press it back out this way. And we got a reasonably 12 by 15 square. Now don't worry about it being exactly 12 by 15, you just need it sort of in the ballpark. So now that we've got it squared up and rolled out, what we're going to do is spread some butter on it. And I have here 45 milliliters of soft butter, 3 tablespoons. So I'm just going to spread that over the surface. Just break it out and put it on in chunks here. And then we'll spread it around a bit. And we'll just give it a little. It's not quite as soft as I'd like, so I'll use my fingers because the warmth will help soften it. There we go, it's starting to spread around now. Okay, and then we want some sweetener. Cinnamon rolls have to be sweet. So I have here 80 milliliters or 1/3 cup of sugar and 10 milliliters or 2 teaspoons of cinnamon that I'm just going to mix together. And we just want to spread that as evenly as we can over the surface of the cinnamon rolls. And if it gets a little thick, don't worry about it. We will spread it out. Okay. So just spread that around from the thick parts to the thin parts. Now, this is where you would add raisins if you like raisins. But remember, we're not using raisins, we're using apples. I just coarsely chopped 1 medium apple. I peeled it, took the core out, and chopped it up. So dump that on top. And spread it around all over the surface of your cinnamon rolls. There we go. Now, You'll note I left this last edge without a lot of apple on it. That's because now we're going to roll it up and we need an edge to seal. So you just start by folding a long edge over and just using your hands, just pull it back and roll it up. There we go. And then just roll that seam up and pinch it. There we go. So now we're going to make 12 rolls. So just take a really sharp knife and start by cutting your cinnamon rolls in half. Now if it starts to stick, I've got some warm water here and you can just run it over the blade and it won't stick. So then we're going to cut the half into a quarter. And each of these quarters has to be cut into 3, and that will give us 12 cinnamon rolls. So we're going to bring back the pans that we put our caramel topping in, and we'll put our rolls in the pan. Now you're looking to put 6 rolls in each pan. And our last pan, and these will now sit and rise for 1 hour. I'm just going to cover them with a towel, leave them in a warm place, and in an hour we'll be ready to put them in the oven. Remember, about 15-20 minutes before you are going to put them in the oven to preheat your oven to 350 degrees Fahrenheit. See you then. Our caramel apple rolls have sat for an hour under a tea towel, and as you can see, they've puffed up beautifully. They're going to be a really gorgeous treat. Now they just have to go into my oven that I preheated to 350 degrees, where they'll cook for 35 minutes. But to make sure they're cooked, I like to do an internal temperature check and make sure they're about 203 degrees Fahrenheit or over inside. So give me a moment and I'm going to throw these into the oven. The cinnamon rolls came out of the oven where they cooked for 35 minutes at 350 degrees. I made sure the internal temperature was over 200. I like about 203. And I let them sit on a wire rack for 5 minutes. Don't let them sit any longer, they might stick. Just run a knife around the edge. And then put a plate on top of the cinnamon rolls. Use some oven mitts and turn the whole thing over. And give it a little bit of a tap, and with any luck, they'll lift right off and you will have absolutely gorgeous caramel apple rolls. Now, I guess we can take a risk of them being a little hot and give them a try. So I'll just get a plate out here and we'll just cut a corner off of one. You can see how wonderfully gooey they are. They will sit up a little bit as they cool down. Oh, look at that caramel. Oh. The dough and the bread is so wonderfully moist and tender. The caramel is rich and creamy and just delicious. The walnuts give it a bit of crunch, and the apples add a bit of sweet tart that make it perfect. This is a wonderful caramel apple roll, and the best part is you can make it.
I have a good woman, I ain't good looking, but I do some cooking, I'm the old fat guy. So use that oven if you want some lovin', be like the old fat guy. like the old fat guy.